Well, some of the reasons why perpetrators of gender-based violence are never convicted and become repeat offenders are said to be due to poorly collected DNA samples, lack of evidence, backlogs of cases, and untraceable perpetrators. To discuss this further, I'm joined now by co-founder of the Ubuntu Rural Women and Youth Movement, that's Wendy Pekeur. Wendy, good morning, and thank you for joining us. So these factors, I list them and I'm just mouthing them off. Poorly collected DNA samples, lack of evidence, backlogs of cases, and untraceable suspects, perpetrators. But if you were to sum it up in your own words, the incidence of recidivism, repeat offenders, people who were initially captured or charged and faced charges, but sometimes never convicted, but then going on to recommit, commit offenses, sexual offenses, gender-based violence cases. What would be your summary of what are the factors at play in as far as that phenomenon is concerned?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is that the Department of Correctional Services says offenders are closely watched and monitored by community correction branches to ensure these parolees complied with their conditions. But I'm just going to make two examples of two parolees that came into my community. I live on the outskirts of Stellenbosch on a farm. We don't know what they did in prison. There's no conversation with the community. They're taken out of another community. They're released from prison or released on bail, and they are told you can't go back to the community where the rape or the murder happened. Then they come into a new community who is unaware of these parolees and what they actually did, what the offense were they were in prison for. And we had two guys that were in our community and we didn't know. We tried to find out because it is our duty to know. We've got eye on the child, eye on elders, eye on people with different abilities. So we have to look after vulnerable people in our community, and we tried to find out. I spoke to the parole correctional services officers. I'm so sorry for the noise. I'm here in one of the venues. It's the closest place I could come to. And they were saying that, you know, they can't tell us why these parolees are in the community, which means there's no access to information for us. Then the first perpetrator, he kept a little girl, 9 years old, hostage for a whole evening. And somebody came to his house. The family were frantically looking for her, and they found her in his house, locked up. The second perpetrator came, and he's still in the community. I spoke to the officers as well, the correction branch officers, and I told them that he's been causing problems in the community. You know, when they say they closely watch and monitor parolees, I don't agree with this. Yeah. Because they only come and they tick a box to say you are at home. They don't come to speak to the neighborhood watch or organizations like Ubuntu and many others who work in the community to make sure women and children and those vulnerable are not violated. They don't speak to us, so they
Wendy,
don't know the problems.
In your reading, is that one of the weaknesses, the follow-through, once someone has been released on parole? Is it a matter of lack of capacity in terms of human resources, or is it lack of capacity in the sense that the people that are there either don't know what it is they're supposed to be doing in following through with these parolees and checking on them and their reintegration into the community, or they just don't know how to do their work properly?
I think it's a lack of, we say there's a lot of lack of political will. I don't know whether training is the issue, because I know even people that work within the correctional service, they know what to do. For them, it shouldn't be a tick box to tick off whether the person is there, but there should be other things that they monitor. So I don't know the forms they have, what questions they're asking, except for checking whether the person is there. Even where they stay, they should ask the people who kind of look or took them in, or community members. I think the gap is that they don't speak to the community to hear whether there's other problems. Michaela Williams, 12-year-old, killed in Pelican Park. Her perpetrator was in prison for rape and attempted murder, 2017, an 8-year-old girl in Mitchell's Plain. They released him on parole. So he was in prison for 8 years. He came out, and he murdered and raped Michaela, only 12 years old. during his sentencing, it came out there was little or no observation of him, and he admitted that he raped 10 more girls. I don't even want to think, where are these girls? We don't know their names. The media didn't report on them. I don't know whether they told their parents. They're sitting with the scars if they didn't come forward to say they were the girls that were raped with him. So I don't think there's a capacity problem, because I see the officers coming to it's my neighbor. They come there to check on him every day. So the staff are coming, but it's the what they do and how they check. So the monitoring, should be more than just checking.
So just as we draw to a close then of this conversation, Wendy, where do we fix that system where, you know, people are paroled and they reoffend? I mean, you're right, you cite a number of examples, and I think the most prominent recently was that case of the murder of Tasneh van Wyk by someone who was out on parole. So where do we fix it? Is it at a policy level that things need to change fundamentally in the parole system, especially in as far as people who either committed sexual offenses, gender-based violence-related offenses, kidnapping and the likes? Do we need a fundamental change there? And is that conversation happening where you are at the presidential summit?
Yes. Can I just say that on Tasneh's case, when the perpetrator was rearrested for her rape and murder, there was 20 charges against him. 11 was rape charges, incest, rape, incest of family members, 20 charges altogether, but he was released on bail, and then he murdered Tasneh. That is so tragic. He should have never been released to roam the streets and to kill another innocent girl. It is on a policy level. Minister Lamola said the department has produced a draft position paper on a revised parole system. So and that would be the basis for discussion and consultation with the role players. Now, role players, who are the role players? It's perhaps the police, it's correctional service, it's maybe social workers and all of that. But the grassroots organizations, we who work in the field, who are first responders to GBV, sometimes we have to take a woman out in the middle of the night to keep her safe, go to court with her to get the protection order, and provide the support when the order is served, to keep an eye and to make sure that we're watching him. We do that. We are not part of these conversations. So unless government and top structures talk to community organizations and neighborhood watchers and us who are on the ground doing the work, we're going to have the papers, and then but then on the ground there's going to be problems. As I said, in that position paper, I would like to see it. Because I haven't seen it. I just did some research this morning. I would like to know, the conversation, like I said, the tick box. We don't want a tick box. We want the parole officers to speak to the neighborhood watchers and the communities, those that keep an eye and make sure. If that can happen, I think we can have a tighter system. But the current legislation that has been passed into laws by President Ramaphosa in January, it's tightening the laws. It's tightening bail conditions. It's also tightening sentencing for rapists and killers of women and children.
Wendy.
So we hope through the legislation, change will come.
All right, I've got to thank you for taking the time out while you are out there at the presidential summit and having the discussion with us. Certainly a sense that something is broken, at least in the parole system, in as far as people who go on to commit sexual offenses. And Wendy, they're citing a number of irrefutable examples of where someone was released with tragic results in as far as violence is concerned. That was the co-founder of Ubuntu Rural Women and Youth Movement, Wendy Pekeur, joining us here on eNCA.